on for anyone listening. So, welcome to the fourth community call. We're joined by Susru this time, which is very special, and why we have a different time slot. Um, so, Susru, do you wanna introduce yourself to the community and say a
Yep.
few words about Ren Labs?
Yeah. Hey guys, I'm Sushruth. Yeah, I started like working at Ren almost like when Ren started on like day one. So yeah, I have been here like since like our database days and like throughout the history of Ren. Yeah, I mean like we evolved from like database to Republic Protocol to Ren, and like we are almost at a point where we already like building everything that we said that we would build in our white paper. So yeah, I mean like that's where like this like whole run labs concept came to be. Like we just decided that yeah, like there are like other things like we want to do and like also like improve like run VM at the same time. So like yeah, we were planning on yeah, I mean like as all of you guys know, like we wanted to like make run VM the like more of a general computing layer instead of yeah, just like being just a bridge. So I mean like the concept of like this general compute layer is not, I mean like is not like something we are not trying to like replace any of the existing systems. We want to like extend everything that already exists. So that is like one of the like founding ethos of like Ren, where like we always want to like add value, not like try to like compete with others or like replace like other blockchains. So like once like Ren's like general compute layer is like built, it would allow like people to like build applications on top of RenVM that could like leverage like the power of all other blockchains that Ren is like connected to. So yeah, like blockchains like Bitcoin, Ethereum, the blockchains which have like smart contract supports, blockchains which do not. And yeah, like RenVM would actually like create the first of its kind platform for allowing people to bring DeFi and like smart contracts and all those things for to like blockchains like Bitcoin, which do not have any. So like people could actually build DeFi applications on top of like RenVM that use like Bitcoin like native assets. Like or like native asset representations on top of RenVM, and also like integrates and like interacts well with like already existing like DeFi protocols on like protocols like Ethereum, Solana, and all these other like EVM chains. So yeah, that's like the goal of like RenVM that we are like trying to build. And so usually like whenever like we try to build these like complex systems, we always want to make sure that we build them right, and we make sure that these systems are actually usable and like a lot of people want to actually use them. So the way we thought of like building this is by building like a specialized product on top of RenVM first. Like once like we are like happy with this product, and like once we believe that other people would actually come in and like build products similar to that, we would actually use the core of that like new product to actually generalize the whole protocol, and slowly like yeah, like start scaling like RenVM, and like start allowing like other developers to come in and like develop on top of RenVM, and building like experiences that are like almost impossible right now. So yeah, like I mean, from that concept of like yeah, trying to build like the first application, like Ren Labs was born. Like I mean, we wanted to like yeah, set up like an entity that would like help Ren grow and like continuously grow. Yeah, by almost like yeah, helping like other applications that are like being built on Ren VM in any way possible, and also like building like tech intensive like protocols on top of Ren VM. Um, so yeah, I mean like that's how like Run Labs came to be. Like I mean, as like an entity or like as a wing that would actually start helping Run VM to like yeah, just like become better and like bigger, and actually add like more value to all Run token holders. Um, so yeah, that yeah, I mean like that is like the general concept of like Run Labs. I mean, could answer like any questions, like if any one can post them. uh, or yeah, I mean like how do you want to do it from here?
Yeah, I saw Tom wrote a few questions on the forum. So Tom, I'm gonna invite you and you get a chance to ask. Um, Otherwise, I can read them up.
Hey, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes,
Awesome.
yep.
Thanks. So yeah, one question I had is basically about how the work is divided between these two different mandates that was mentioned in the blog post. Basically developing RenVM as like a general purpose L1 and yeah, building these different applications that utilize this. So how is the work divided here? Like how do you work? Do you work mostly on the general purpose or the applications? Or how does this work in practice?
Yep. Mm-hmm. So yeah, like for like any of these like new applications that we would be building, like for example, catalog finance and stuff, we would mostly like yeah building like completely separate teams for that. So like the whole core team of like RenVM would continue working on RenVM and like trying to build like new applications and like I mean like new features to like RenVM itself. And we will actually have like a separate team for like projects like catalog finance, who would actually like yeah just like completely build that protocol. And like once that catalog finance system is like ready, we will use like the core part of like those like core part and like core features of it back in RenVM to actually make it general purpose. So yeah, I mean like yeah, like the RunVM team would continue to work on like RunVM specific things, and like we'll have like a new team that would like work on these new things. And yeah, I would be like yeah overseeing like both those projects. So I would be like yeah more in like a managerial like leadership role. And yeah, like I love like doing like R&D and stuff. So I would still be like helping out with like R&D side of things. And yeah, it's like coming up with like new product ideas and like new project concepts for like both Ren and like catalog finance. Did that answer your question, or did I miss something?
Yes, definitely. That's very helpful. Thank you. So do you see multiple teams developing here, all working on different applications, while general purpose capabilities?
Um, I mean, like our focus is to actually like yeah, just like first focus on building a single application that would like let us. I mean, like I just like find out like and solve a lot of problems that we do not even know yet. Like on how we would like actually convert like our like current NVM system into a general purpose computing layer. So that is one of the main reasons why we wanted to yeah, just like 100% have like a team that is like fully focused on building catalog finance. And once like catalog finance is like ready, we would most more likely focus on like making our NVM general purpose than actually building like more applications. But yeah, again, I think this could change based on like how things are. And like if we deem that like there is like another protocol that we should definitely add as soon as we can, so that like I mean we can actually yeah just like get like more usage like to NVM, or yeah just like get more utility for like all these like dark nodes, right? So that they are like earning more fees. For now we are like yeah focused on only catalog finance, but yeah like Ren Labs as an entity would actually be working would almost like have like more than like just catalog finance underneath it. Like so we would be as almost like yeah partnering with people, or like yeah just like having like in-house like made products under like Ren Labs. um, so yeah, I mean like right now immediately I would say like for the next few months, at least like next 3 to 6 months, we are like only focused on catalog finance under Ren Labs and RenVM. And yeah, like after 6 months I think we could like explore again.
Yep, that sounds great to me. Are there any other questions? Because otherwise, we have a pretty cool presentation by DeFi Whiskey that we can get started.
I want to ask a question.
Yeah, one question that we have
Yeah,
to go over.
you mentioned that
Cool.
Yeah, you have to talk a bit louder.
all you
Yep.
mentioned that
Can
all
hear.
RAN holders will benefit from new dApps built on a RAN VM. Can you maybe expand on this thought more?
Uh, yeah, we are actually like still planning on the specifics. So we haven't like still like decided on exactly how we want to like build this like incentive system. So we do have like plans on like yeah making sure that like rent token holders actually benefit from all these like other dApps that are going to be like built on RenVM, for example, like under like Ren Labs. But yeah, like there are like yeah some specifics that we are like still planning around, and like yeah, once we have them like finalized, we'll yeah let you guys know for sure.
But as of today, we can safely say to the Ren community that even if you are not operating Ren Dark Node, you will still benefit with by holding Ren, correct?
Again, yeah, like I mean, that is yet not finalized on like how we want to actually handle it. So you would have to yeah like wait for like a bit more time, and like yeah, we'll like yeah let you guys know.
Right.
Uh, yeah, so Mag wants to ask one question. So that this is the last question we can take. Uh,
Yep.
I sent you an invite, Mag. There we go.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Hi, Susru. Well, first, I just wanna welcome you to the community, even though you've been for a long time with us. It's always been sort of like in the shadow, so now you're in the spotlight. So, well, welcome for that.
Thank
And
you.
then my question is around how is the connectivity of the apps that are gonna be built in catalog or RenVM. So how they're gonna connect with other parts of DeFi, whether there's gonna be some risk of isolating ourselves, like whether those apps built on top of RenVM will be able to interact um, with other applications or ecosystems fluidly. Because I think my question comes because you mentioned that the idea of catalog is sort of serve as the first application that's going to show the capabilities of building on top of NVM, and that is sort of it's going to create that attraction to developers to continue building on NVM. But then if that doesn't happen and we continue to develop the applications, how those applications can connect with the rest of DeFi?
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks. That's definitely a great, awesome question. Yeah, so yeah, like the whole concept of like catalog is that like we would want to almost like I mean the like vision of catalog finance is almost like trying to provide like DeFi to blockchains that do not have DeFi, and like actually extend DeFi on like protocols that do have DeFi. So for example, Ethereum and Solana protocols already have like a lot of like DeFi ecosystem already, right? So there is already like a lot of liquidity on these blockchains for like token pairs and stuff, and it would like make no sense for us to actually try to bootstrap liquidity pools that are already existing, for example, right? Like so we want to like create liquidity pools that do not exist today, and also yeah just like leverage the liquidity pools that exist on like other blockchains to actually create like a almost like this boundless liquidity system, which would like allow users to buy like assets across chain on like an on a dex with like an experience which almost like rivals a lot of like centralized exchanges. That is like the goal of catalog finance. And yes, like so since like renvm is like an interoperability layer, right? Like so we do like smpc and like general purpose compute already right now. We could actually yeah just like listen to like events and like things on other blockchains and can trigger like state changes on like this catalog finance system. So using that, like we would actually be able to like allow people to actually like do atomic transactions between Ethereum and catalog finance, or like like catalog finance and like Solana and all these things. So people should be able to like yeah like almost let's say create like orders or like just like buy and sell tokens across chains using like catalog finance system, leveraging the liquidity that is already existing on other blockchains. And yes, like so we want to like almost make catalog finance like a blueprint for like the future developers who want to come in and like develop on top of yeah like renvm. And we want to yeah just like show the whole power of like renvm like through catalog finance, so and show like the viability of like a project that is built on renvm as well. So that I mean the easiest way to actually attract developers is to show them that like there is like money to be made here, and there are like project like almost like products that can be built here that cannot be built like anywhere else. And yeah just like almost like building one and just like showing it to them that like it is actually financially sustainable and like actually creates like an experience that like cannot be like duplicated anywhere else. So yes, like so we would be like yeah, like interacting with like other like DeFi systems, like let's say Uniswap or like other like uh, trading protocols on like the specific blockchains, and we just like add all of them together into like a liquidity system that is just like more than like everything else, like I mean like independently, you know.
Thanks for those answers, Caesar. That was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have to move on
Thank
now
you.
to DeFi Whiskey's presentation. So yeah, thanks so much for being here.
Yep, thanks guys, like yeah.
So I invited DeFi Whiskey now. Yep, it's here. So I don't know if you want to do a video thing as well. I haven't tried that, but um, audio only is fine as well. We have the recording of the screen in case you want to do show anything. But so you're muted now, DeFi Whiskey. So just turn yourself on and go ahead.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, unfortunately I have a hard stop in a little bit less than 30 minutes. So I'm going to try to get through everything so we have time for questions. And I'd like to perhaps even next week have a treasury focused call, not for me to present anything, but just to kind of, for those interested, we can just kind of talk through some more about the vision for the Treasury, maybe even evening, late afternoon, early evening European time, so our North and South American friends can participate. Okay, so yes, thanks to Max, by the way, for inviting me, and this RFC came out of discussions I'd had previously with Max. And I just want to summarize it now, and then hopefully we have time for questions. There were kind of four things I was trying to do with this RFC. The first one is pretty obvious, which is for Ren to be more proactive with our treasury. And my thoughts on that, specifically the creation of a committee, a treasury committee, to kind of facilitate that. So that's fairly obvious, and I'll talk more about that. That's kind of the point of this discussion. But there were a few other things too, which might have been a little bit more subtle, but I think they're important. One, I wanted to define the terms, and specifically with Ren Labs and Ren, to make sure it's clear what that means from a treasury perspective. The things we need to focus on with our treasury, with the treasury that Ren has. By that I mean the one controlled by dark node operators. What we don't need to focus on, for example, things like the core team salaries, the core team expenses are not the responsibility of our treasury. But there are other things that should be. So we need to kind of define that and be clear about what we should be focused on and what we shouldn't. Also to talk about where we are now, which is at about $250,000 in the Ren treasury, as I defined it. That might grow to 1 million in about 6 months or so. Obviously, it's heavily dependent on the price of Bitcoin, at least as we have our treasury defined today. But just being clear about the Ren treasury versus Ren Labs, I thought was very important. Another thing is I wanted to bring up this idea of committee facilitation, committee management. I think it's a good way to get things done, to be so dependent on the core team. It's wonderful as a larger group to discuss things, to debate things, and it's critical, and obviously to vote on things, because that's the core of Ren, that the dark node operators vote on how we want to move forward. But having, let's say, smaller groups, teams, committees, or whatever, help facilitate, move things forward, I think is very important. And it doesn't just apply to the Treasury. To give a couple quick examples, Asset allocation, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail, is a very complex topic. And it doesn't really work well, I think, coming to some conclusions in a large group. I think you really need kind of a smaller team to listen to what the community wants to do, but then come back with some specific recommendations there. And then the community, the larger community, but in this specific case, the dark node operators can vote. And that's because asset allocation is complex. It involves lots of things. What are our budgets? What do we need to pay people in? What token? Otherwise, we'll be taking on, currency risk, et cetera, et cetera. So and if we try to do it as a larger community, just kind of ad hoc, it's going to be difficult. And also, when in a larger community, what typically happens is we default into doing nothing because that's the easiest path forward. So right now, our entire treasury, or 96% of it, is in Bitcoin. Now that might be a great strategy moving forward, but I think it's better if we, as dark node operators, formally vote on that and discuss why we have 96% of our treasury in Bitcoin. And another example would be, I mentioned in my RFC, was Aave. They have a treasury committee of 5 people. And even one of the members of that committee is from Llama, which is a kind of a separate DAO focused on treasury management issues across DeFi. So even within their committee, they have reserved a spot for someone who is not necessarily part of the Aave community directly, but they feel value there because having someone from Llama on the committee can help facilitate the discussion, bring in data maybe they wouldn't otherwise have, et cetera, et cetera. So, so I think as now we kind of move forward, especially in light of Ren and Ren Labs, and we want to do more, empowering smaller teams or groups or committees with very clear guidelines is the way I think we should go. And the final point I wanted to kind of bring out was just that, and this is related to kind of having more committees, is that with Ren Labs, it's important for us now with Ren, the dark node operators and the wider Ren community, to really step up in certain areas and be more proactive and take ownership of more things. I think we have the luxury now to not have a lot of focused teams, groups, committees to move things forward because we are very dependent on the core team. And that's wonderful. And by the way, and obviously they are part of our community, without a doubt, a critical part of the community. And I'm certainly not saying they shouldn't always be heavily involved. Absolutely. But in some areas, I think we need to be the driver, and we need to be, say, reaching out to Max and the core team to support us and assist us, but not really always dependent on them to drive certain things. So, but what those boundaries are, what those borders are, I think we need to work out all together as a community moving forward. But I think we need to start that process. And one way to do that, I think, is going to be to empower smaller teams on our side to drive things. So back to Treasury, because that was kind of the point of the RFC. I just want to highlight some of the things I wrote, because it was, and I apologize, a very long post. But some things I want to highlight now. One issue we have, I think, is simply we have just one fund, and that's the ecosystem fund. I mean, it makes sense because we just need to start somewhere. And, I think that was a very good place to start, because it's probably one of the most important things we can do, which is help to develop out our ecosystem. But is it really the right way to have only one fund, and how do we kind of expand that? And I think instead of doing it ad hoc, which is someone comes up with another RFC, hey, what about this other thing? What about marketing? Or what about, I don't know, Fastlane or this and that? All these things are probably very, very good things to do, by the way, but I think it's time now perhaps to step back and come up with a little bit more holistic kind of view of what we want to do with the Treasury. Instead of waiting for a new RFC, RFP to come up, and just we slowly start to build this out. Budgeting was something else I highlighted. I think that's also critical because, with one fund, maybe it starts with, okay, we want to support our ecosystem. All the money that we've collected is going into this one fund. Does that mean we want 100% of our budget or 100% of our treasury to be allocated to what we call an ecosystem fund? I don't think so. Or we have to expand the definition of that ecosystem fund to such a point that it basically means anything we think is important. So my thoughts were, and again, this is something I think we need to work out as a community, is to create or have a Ren treasury, which is where the money goes into, and then we allocate that out to various, funds or areas, with the ecosystem being one of those, and then a very important part of that. The budgeting, though, it kind of really forces us to kind of make those decisions. And the budgeting doesn't have to be 100% or precise. We can always modify, but it forces us to kind of think in terms of 6 months minimum, 12 months, maybe even longer. And that gets back into things like asset allocation. To say that it's a good idea to keep everything in Bitcoin or not, it's just a hard discussion to have without context. But when you put budgets together and think about how we want to spend money, it helps to kind of back that into, okay, what does that mean from an asset allocation standpoint? So, for example, the ecosystem fund, right now it's in BTC. Is that how we're going to pay, for development that we're supporting? Are we paying them in Bitcoin? You can see the situation where we can allocate money to them in Bitcoin based on, I don't know, their needs, which is perhaps calculated in USD. Maybe they need whatever, $50,000. But over the weeks or a month or so before the money is allocated, that $50,000 could now be $200,000 or $10,000, right? Because of the variability of Bitcoin. So if we determine that actually we're paying them in something other than Bitcoin, it might be time then to have an asset allocation strategy that supports that. And also that gets into the fact that, do we pay them everything up front? Are there going to be milestones, et cetera, et cetera? All these are kind of complex things that maybe can be worked out within smaller groups or teams. Someone suggested there's another RFC around a rewards fund, which I think is a great idea. This is another example of it's not really an ecosystem fund per se, but it's something I think we should do. How does that fit into our overall kind of treasury strategy? How does that fit into the allocation strategy? Are we paying them in Bitcoin? Are we sending them, 0.00001 Bitcoin for some insightful comment on Discord? Are we paying them in Ren? Are we paying them in some other token? Who determines that? Certainly, this is another example of something where we, the darknode operators, would probably want to allocate funds to a team that can manage that. We don't want to have to vote on every whatever $50, $10, $100 allocation. So that's another example of, let's say, a budget that we can create and fund and agree on as darknode operators, but then empower a small team of people to kind of manage. And then finally from that, you get into, we can allocate the money that we have in our treasury. We can do some forecasting of how much we'll have in the treasury over the next 12 months. Is that going to be enough? Is it too much? Is it too little? It's one thing to come back to darknode operators and say, look, the 7 point whatever it is percent, it's just not enough for what we think we need to do, and here's why, and here's some specific things we want to fund. That's an interesting discussion. But just to say, well, maybe 10% is better, or 15% or 5%, without kind of having that overall big picture and budgeting behind it, it's really hard to, I think, as a darknode operator, make an informed decision. And this is something a smaller team like a treasury committee can really help facilitate. Another thing was investing. Even if we decide to keep all the money in one fund, an ecosystem fund, and say we're just not going to do anything else, just to simplify things, I assume we still want to invest that money while it's sitting there before it's spent. How do we want to invest? Are we trying to maximize yield? What about the risks? How risky do we want to be with our investments? Do we want to allocate money for strategic investment? Right? We talk about a development fund or an ecosystem fund, excuse me, to create things that can run on Ren VM and drive volume increases. That's great, but we could also potentially, purchase or take a stake in other projects, existing projects, as a strategic investment to kind of tie them to Ren VM. All that's possible, but there needs to be a strategy there. And again, that's something I think smaller teams can kind of develop and then present it to the larger community of dark node operators for approval. Another area is implementation. A good example here, I think, is the fast lane that was talked about. I think that's also was kind of a result of maybe we don't have a complete strategy yet for the Treasury. And again, that's normal. We've just started, but that was first brought up in April. So that was almost 7 months ago. And it's when we don't have a smaller team to really drive that and to move things forward, it can take time. And is the fast lane a good idea or a bad idea? I don't know, but it would be good if we could kind of move that forward and come to some resolution. And implementation could mean, let's say, moving RFCs and RIPs forward, but it could also just mean doing things that the community has voted on, or dark node operators have voted on to do, or we decided is important. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the form of RFC or RFP, but empowering a small team can push things, move things forward faster. And from the Treasury side, I think it's going to be very important. Otherwise, it just takes a long time to get things done. And again, maybe that was fine when we had a core team. We could be a little bit passive about things. And obviously there's still the core team there. But as I said, in certain areas, we need to be more active and proactive. And smaller groups or teams under the clear direction of dark node operators, I believe, can move things forward faster. And reporting was another area. We have some information about our treasury. That's good. We see the amounts. We see some token breakdowns, but I think we should see a lot more. And I think, especially if we start doing things like budgeting, we need to understand what's the status of those budgets, how much money has been spent. Even when we allocate money to other projects, what's happening on those projects? Do we give them everything up front and just say, hey, please do what you said you're going to do? Maybe we release money over certain milestones. If so, who is going to be managing that? And who can report back to the community on how things are going? Again, something that a smaller group or team or someone we enable can help facilitate that, so the larger Ren community has this information we need. So all of that is that's the high level summary, but that kind of got me to the point of saying, okay, this is why I think a Treasury Committee is the way to go. It's what other groups, DAOs, projects are doing. As far as the Treasury Committee itself, my recommendation, obviously this is up for discussion, was a 5-member team and having one core team member as part of that committee, because it's so critical for us to coordinate closely with the core team. I would see this first Treasury Committee almost as an interim committee, just to kind of really take the community feedback and come up with what the mandate, the charter for the Treasury Committee moving forward. So it should definitely be limited term. And then after that's finished, they should disband, and then we should have elections for a new committee. I think the 3 main things they should focus on is developing this charter in the form of another RFC, but now more specific. We can put in front of the entire community. We can all discuss. Then they can take that and, based on that, come back with an RIP or at least maybe a couple of options for specifically how we should move forward. So we can vote on that. And I also think this first kind of group should look at some quick wins. Maybe some things we don't want to wait. I mentioned the fast lane before. That's already an RFC that's been debated on. Does that need to be incorporated in some way now, or can it wait? The rewards fund that was already brought up, which I like a lot. Perhaps that's something that can be we can move forward on faster. We don't need to wait. But I think that's up to the committee to kind of determine what are some quick wins we can do now, get in the form of RIPs that the dark node operators can build on and we can move forward on. So yeah, that's the overview. Again, I apologize. It was such a long RFC. I do want to have another discussion next week, so we can all kind of talk. But happy now to take any questions you have.
Yeah, that was great. I love the presentation. I was reading the forum thread, and one of the sort of main concerns I saw there people raise is if this committee would be advisory, or if it has authority to spend funds that already been allocated towards it. I guess that was one of the points I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and we have to determine it, right? My feeling would be that nothing is spent without dark node approval, right? I don't want anyone out there doing anything that hasn't been approved by dark node operators. I think that's the core of the community. I think it's a very good policy. Are there times when the dark nodes can say, look, we're gonna put money in one specific fund. Let's call it a rewards fund, right? It's gonna have this much money only, and we're going to enable, I don't know, 2 people who are, I don't know, maybe because they're active on Discord, whatever, to be people who can spend money from that fund. And the maximum is, whatever, this much per quarter. That's all we're putting in the fund anyway. But they have the discretion of how to do it. Yeah, in that case, I don't think we need to have dark nodes approve every single, as I said, 50 or 10 Ren that we give out to this person who did something, right? But I do think it's important for the dark node operators in that case to, fund the budget. Say, yes, we agree to that, and these are the people who have the rights to allocate that money. And this is the basis on which they should allocate them. But then we trust the community and the people we designate to carry that out. But on the big issues that involve a lot of money, of course, that's in those cases, I think those votes need to be full dark node votes as far as what's the total budget that goes anywhere, what's our investment strategy. Those things need to be approved as a community. I don't think it's difficult to do. Snapshot voting is quite easy. So my bias would be to vote on more things than less as a community of dark node operators.
Yeah, I tend to agree with your take. It would be pretty annoying for the community to vote on every single 10 rand being spent. It's not something that's a big attention drain. It can burn people out from governance. So okay, I like the model of sort of maybe pre-approving a portion of funds. So we make a budget that the dark node operators vote on, and then that
Correct.
budget has to be followed using some limits or something.
Correct.
And the idea about a charter or a constitution, writing that out, it's gonna be significant amounts of work that I assume we need. Yeah, we need more time to work on that. Maybe also in a small group. So you suggested a call next week. It would be.
Yes, I think I would. That's why I would probably sooner than later get to the point where we nominated people voted in by Dark Nodes, a small team, to kind of put that charter together. And also, that's why I want to do as well, because it will take some time. I think we should wait, I don't know, 4 months or so, however, 3 months, 6 months, I don't know. We do anything, but these quick wins should be in the form of RIPs for vote by dark node operators. What I've described here is just kind of one version. Something along these lines is what I think first committee should be focused on, developing that charter, and then once that has been formally voted in by dark node operators, I think that can expand, and we can, if part of that vision was we're going to have a regular, committee of 6 months or 1 year or whatever, have elections and whatever, that should be part of that charter or constitution that was put together by the first committee of how that's all going to operate.
Yeah. And one other big question I think that community has is sort of how would a committee be incentivized, or how would there be salaries for such a committee, for instance, or how do you make sure that the committee actually has the full interest of the Ren Treasury and Ren community heart?
Yeah, I think that's really part of this initial charter, and it can be voted in retroactively. That says, look, as part of the charter, we think this interim committee should be rewarded this many Ren or whatever. I think so. I do think this should be compensated. Way it's not a full-time job; it's a committee, role, and people have jobs, and they also serve on various organizations in their spare time. Some are voluntary, some are paid. I think the same should be with Ren. Some of these roles, and this RFC has already been kind of introduced. As I said, I like it a lot. We need to kind of figure out as a community what's appropriate level of compensation. For what, it's probably going to vary. Some things won't be compensated. My guess is many dark node operators, it's just it's not going to be the money from serving on this committee. It's not going to be the primary motivation. It's going to be, they have a huge stake in Ren, and they want to see it succeed. So they want to be part of these committees to kind of help formulate strategy. But having said that, I do think it's important to have some compensation, even if it's symbolic, just to show that, we're rewarding people's participation. But again, I think that's something I think that this kind of interim committee should weigh in on and come up with some recommendations for the wider dark node operators to vote on.
Agreed. Liberty, you had a question or something? It's you.
Yeah. I just wanted to pop in and share some thoughts, and most importantly, thank Whiskey here for taking the big step in bringing this to the forefront. If you look at A16Z's progressive decentralization paper, we're kind of in that step now where we've got a product market fit, and the community needs to rise up and start figuring out how we're going to transition to being a DAO. And I think treasury management, since we now have a treasury, is probably the first big, great step. And I agree that it's not going to be something that we can sort of do, as a collective without some kind of centralized group who are really focused on the task. So I think personally that a treasury committee, whether it's interim or rotating or however it's to be organized, I think is a terrific idea. I do think, and this is the point that I was stressing, that the charter is going to be an important piece. And I think that it also is the place here where we bear the risk of being bogged down procedurally the longest if we're not careful. So it may be worthwhile, if we have a follow-up call. I know Whiskey's time is limited today, that we discuss the style of how that's to be crafted. I would offer one approach would be provision by provision, to which I offered my RFC, which is not the most important thing in the world, but it's an idea of how to proceed forward where, if we had a committee, they could come up with, each provision within the charter and have them separately discussed and voted on so that we can have kind of a style and cadence for putting the whole overreaching document together. On the topic of compensation that just came up, I like the example, in the U.S. of state government officials who are, or town government officials who are paid something that is interesting, but certainly not enough to live off of, so that their time is shown to be valued, but at the same time, nobody's going to take that role because it's going to make them rich. So I think that's kind of an important balance that we should discuss and strike. And I would also offer that payouts be made in Ren, because that can help those who are most involved grow as dark node operators, and also take Ren off the market. So those are some of my thoughts. Just a background, since I'm here on the stage on my RFC. I think one of the sort of places that we can store treasury funds that's relatively low risk and on mission for us as a DAO are the various liquidity pools. I know there's been some discussion of whether they really need our funds, or whether we could make an impact with those funds on these pools. And I kind of think that's not the point, and we can discuss this. This is just something I threw out to get the process started of looking at possible charter provisions. But I think that it's very on mission for us to be able to go out and say, well, we keep our treasury mostly in our own ecosystem. So that's kind of the thought behind that. And of course that I think that, while there should certainly be an overreaching allocation strategy, as Whiskey was saying, probably most of it we're going to want to be low risk so that when currency fluctuation occurs, we're not going to be caught off guard. So, Ren stable pairs, something like that. I tend to be a fairly low risk type person with majority of the assets. So those are some of my thoughts. And
guys,
again,
I'm sorry.
thank you.
And sorry to interrupt. I'm just going to have to run. I have to pick up my. Thank you, and thanks Liberty for that. I basically agree with everything you said. So, and next week I think I'll be happy to have a more focused discussion. But anyway, thank you guys, and see you soon on the forums.
Cheers.
You. All right. Yeah.
Right. Well, that was effectively all I was looking to say. So I'll hand the mic back to you, Max.
Thank you. I'll invite GLH DeFi here. So the invite is sent. There we go.
Yeah. Don't know if you guys can hear me or not.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah, just on DeFi Whiskey's conversation, going back in terms of the Treasury Committee. There's obviously a lot of clever people on board on Ren, and I'm just thinking in terms of like the composition of the Treasury Committee is basically, I suppose, not vetting people on who comes on board and who doesn't, but because we are dealing with large or potentially very large sums of money here, it would be good to have some, and I'm sure there's a lot of people on here, individuals who have had deep experience in terms of treasury committees, institutionalized private equity, sort of managing cash, from I suppose the old TradFi world, that they can sort of lend their sort of expertise into the Treasury Committee to help sort of orchestrate it and govern it from a from a risk perspective. Again, putting myself on the stage, Max, we've spoken before, very happy to get involved in that process and help where I can. But yeah, it's super exciting, and I do agree with everything that DeFi Whiskey has mentioned on the call. But yeah, it's I do feel like we're getting into that realm where this whole process needs to become very institutionalized and documented everywhere, just so that dark node operators are in the know and clearly informed. So again, I'm very happy to get involved. I just wanted to speak out to you guys and say that.
Yeah, thank you. That's very feels very promising. So speaking for the team, like we believe, uh, maybe not a committee per se, but the community taking control over the treasury is by far the most impactful thing you can do to bootstrap a real DAO that has real governance. It's not bottlenecked by the team in any way. You can make your own decisions and you can direct the Ren ecosystem and impact and all of those good things. That's something the community can do when you take sort of control of the treasury. So the way the community structures treasury governance right now is a very important sort of time in the RenDAO development. So I definitely, anyone that's interested in helping out with this is the perfect opportunity to get like really involved and shape and direct. So, yeah, the RenDAO and the Ren ecosystem at large. So the team, I mean, the Ren Labs team will be doing a lot of development and ecosystem growth, but we can't do it without a community. Um, and the Ren DAO as being sort of independent of the Ren team, like that will truly uh, sort of make the Ren ecosystem a different beast that's capable of doing much more things. Uh, the core team can't do everything on its own, and it certainly isn't decentralized if the core team would do everything on its own. So I, I think this is very promising. That yeah, speaking from the team. Do anyone have any questions? Arvi, I know you had a proposal that's very sort of tied into the treasury as well. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah, I mean,
was My intention was basically what was mentioned already, to reward the community members, those who were active before everything that is going on right now. So basically, last past 3.5 years, and my idea was to show a sign of appreciation and say thank you, and community engagement and community rewards is certainly something that ecosystem fund can be used for, I think. And basically, my idea was before all that, which DeFi Whiskey is talking about, was to take a small portion out of the fund and basically say a thank you to the OGs in our community. Um, Maybe someone has any opinions on this who are on the call right now. I think overall reception by the community was favorable and they like the idea. So basically, what we are waiting for now is the community fund to come online, and either with the committee or without the committee, uh, this RFC will be formed into a fully fledged out RIP and will be voted by the dark nodes as usual. Anyone have any comments on that? Okay, one thing that I didn't mention before was um, money amounts that are going to be rewarded. And as it was already mentioned today, small centralized groups are better at moving things forward in a faster pace at a faster pace. So basically, I formed my own little group with me and Tom and we have discussed different ways how we can basically reward our OGs. And if anyone have any ideas on this matter, or maybe perhaps you want to join the group, speak out.
if anyone wants to say anything, you can either write in the governance chat uh, or raise your hand and I'll invite you to the stage. Oh, yeah, Wes joined.
Hey Wes, unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Morning, mate. Thanks for letting me on. Yeah, it's a shame Mr. Whiskey has had to head off. He does some great work, doesn't he, across so many spaces. Appreciate his input. Just on the there was a short discussion on how voting may or may not happen in the election of the committee. My view is that we elect and devolve power to this committee to do certain things up to a certain limit. So we can say, okay, you can spend this much and you can do these kind of things. And then votes go to a keep a DAO style system of only, it's going to pass unless lots of people say no kind of deal, which some of you will be familiar with. And that means that we can professionalize with a small team, as it were, like we've been running now. But we can kind of, as I say, give that power to some trusted people, and then keep them accountable through negative-based voting and regular elections, and even a recall method for people if they're not performing the way we want.
Yeah, the Keeper DAO governance paper is quite interesting. I read it last week, I think. We can link out to it if people don't know about it, but yeah, that's one way of sort of limiting or sort of aligning power so like a committee wouldn't have too much power to do everything. Um, the the hardest part in a DAO is to get uh, engagement in the beginning. So the Keeper DAO model is sort of like you have assigned some authority to a group to make a proposal, and then if unless there's a lot of uh, disapproval of a proposal, it will sort of get passed. So you keep stuff going, you keep governance going without sort of needing everyone to vote on everything um, all the time.
Yeah, that's it. Have I can't remember if I asked this already in the chat. Have we considered separating Ren the asset and obviously the token does a certain specific thing. It allows you to run a dark node and there's some other fringe use cases, including liquidity providing and obviously just being there for the price. But have we considered differentiating Ren from the asset and a governance token that would then be in control of the DAO and its funds?
Yeah, right now it's dark nodes, the dark node voting power token that's implicit. Um, the Ren token itself doesn't give any governance power unless you're operating a dark node currently.
Yeah, forgive me, I forgot that we had those. Yeah.
So we sort of have we have a little bonus here in that we already have the people that are the most engaged by running nodes who also have the voting power. So um, that is a nice little boost to have. Wes,
Yeah.
you can feel free also to ask your question. We currently can't hear you. You're still quiet, unfortunately. But did anyone have any sort of thoughts on RVs rewarding community members proposal? It could be done separately from the Treasury Committee. Like those two things aren't necessarily tied at all. Before if the community wants to go with the Treasury Committee, uh, that might take a while, as DeFi Whiskey said, like 3-4 months maybe. But we can still get proposals in before then. Just as soon as the community ecosystem fund is live, it can be used to uh, for anything that the community deems important to the ecosystem, which includes uh, rewarding the community members for participating in the ecosystem and working on growing it.
I think overall, it's broadly a good idea to incentivize participation in in any company, in any government, anywhere where people organize to accomplish things. There's generally some form of compensation for driving good work. It certainly bears a discussion as to what that's going to look like. And once again, I would encourage that all such things be paid in Ren. To reap what we sow, as a theme. But I think overall it's a good idea. It just needs to be discussed, hammered out, and agreed upon. That people who are proposing things and engaged should benefit in some way.
Agreed, and yes, agreed that rewards might make sense to be paid out in Ren. That aligns everything the best. And of course, then since there isn't any Ren in the treasury yet, that's a small thing that needs to be sorted out.
Well, perhaps we can propose that a certain percentage allocation of treasury funds, each epic will buy and store Ren from some exchange, which I'm sure the non-dark node holders would appreciate the buying pressure that would create, small as it may be.
Yeah, I think it could be on chain everything together with SafeSnap. We'll see exactly sort of how challenging it is to use SafeSnap in a sort of nimble and efficient way. Of course, a multisig is always easier to use, but SafeSnap should be basically like a multisig with some Oracle feature. That the reason why SafeSnap isn't up yet is partly because you need to enable a little Oracle feature that reads from the snapshot system, I believe, and then in the backend in RenVM we still need to enable something called whitelisting. So RenVM can send funds and mint funds to some address that hasn't initiated a mint itself. So you need to implement this in a safe way. So RenVM can send funds to an address that hasn't done the typical RenBridge stuff beforehand. Because otherwise you can only mint Ren BTC, for instance, if you've sent BTC to a Bitcoin gateway. That's how you're able to mint Ren BTC. So this feature of RenVM actually sending funds to some address without having this beforehand, it just needs some safe development beforehand and testing before this is released, but this is a high priority now for the team as soon as host to host is out, which is very soon.
Well, let me ask you, Max, with regard to how the Treasury is ultimately going to allocate funds. Of course, I think, and I think Whiskey agrees that having a charter in place to drastically limit the function of said committee so that it's working, for or against our communal aims is obvious in every action. is important. But once those aims are established, it may be in everyone's best interest for them to have some level of direct spend ability without going to a vote each time, as long as the provisions are laid out clearly as to what they're allowed to allocate to. So I wonder if having a separate multi-sig for whoever is elected that maybe has a public vote backstop, might be something to be programmatically implemented.
No,
Anyhow,
definitely.
just
If a treasury is built out, you could have a treasury multisig. So funds would go from SafeSnap to the treasury multisig through a vote. So dark node holders are still approving that transaction. If if a budget should be allocated to the treasury multisig, but that yes, that would be the only way for the committee to do stuff, like quick small transactions without requiring all dark node operators to vote. So it could become like there would be different multi-sigs for different committees, um, and a big like this huge multi-sig that is SafeSnap, um, and then when the time like in the future eventually this could be all ingrained inside RenVM itself using a governance module, but that's definitely going to take a while. So we're going to be utilizing these tools that already are out there. There could be multi-sigs on different chains as well, so we're not getting hit by high Ethereum layer 1 fees all the time. There could be a multi-sig on Solana, for instance. There could be a multi-sig on Arbitrum, etc. Um, so we could maybe limit SafeSnap transactions to sort of the big transactions, and all the small, if someone is sending out 100 Ren to reward someone, it might not make sense to have that vote go through Snapshot and then pay a layer 1 Ethereum gas fee that might be $50 just to send 100 Ren. Um, yeah, this is stuff that needs to be worked out.
And I imagine the available technology will be continually evolving. I think that 5-10 years from now, the idea of performing singular transactions directly on chain and not on an L2 is going to sound pretty ludicrous with how the cost of ETH and assets are going. Although we do have Solana, but it may be worthwhile for us to start thinking in terms of operating on L2 to the extent possible.
Yep. I mean, we're definitely gonna feel the burn if we try to do too much stuff on Ethereum layer 1. Um, and unfortunately, SafeSnap's only live on Ethereum layer 1 for now, but in case that also gets available on Arbitrum, for instance, we could migrate this. RenVM can mint the assets to any host chain, of course, that we support, and it can also be held inside RenVM itself. So there's many different paths, and this could also be something that the Treasury Committee would be working on, is to figure out the most cost-effective way of managing the funds without burning too much gas. Because that gas has to be paid by someone, and it would, of course, then have to be paid by the fund itself, the treasury itself, and so that's revenue being earned by RenVM. If that gets spent too much on Ethereum gas, then that's a thing we definitely should improve, because that's revenue that otherwise would have gone to darknet operators if we didn't have a treasury committee, etc. So we shouldn't be wasting any money if we don't have to.
So what about if we go back to the point that was last discussed about my RFC?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll rephrase maybe. What amount do you think is acceptable to reward OG community members, and how that reward might be calculated. I already had some ideas about this, but I'm curious what you have to say, if you have anything to say.
You can also write in the governance chat if you want to answer Arvi's question.
While people are thinking, hopefully, I gotta say
It's
that
it's difficult to answer that question though, right?
I
You
know,
know,
I know. That's why I'm asking.
in terms of like what's the value, right? That the OGs are you able to quantify that in terms
Okay.
of, you know, and these are just questions that are running through my mind, is how do you quantify their value, which obviously there is value associated to them because they've obviously contributed a lot to the Ren community, right? But also the only thing I would say is that of the Treasury Fund, I think everything needs to be sort of documented, tabled, discussed, and then, you know, agreed on. I don't from where I'm sitting is I don't think there's a rush in any of this, right? The way that Ren's been built has been slow, steady, don't lose a dime, and I think we need to consider and just you have that same approach on the Treasury Fund, right? Slow, steady, calculated, don't take unnecessary risk, right? And I think that's what, you know, I hear what you're saying. Yes, they're important, the OGs, but is that you know, we should probably list out a priority list of what the community fund could be spent on, and then we need to sort of table that as, okay, what is, because there isn't at the moment a huge amount, right? So we need to allocate that accordingly to the highest priority initiatives that need to be undertaken to drive Ren forward. I don't think necessarily just rewarding OGs is, and because I don't have that list of what the community think is the top, you know, points to or work streams that we need to undertake. Once we have that visibility, then we can make a sort of a prioritization in terms of importance and then work accordingly to that and allocate appropriate budget to it. But until we have that visibility, I feel it's very difficult to make that call. That's just my 2 cents of worth.
I don't know if you have seen the post in
I haven't.
governance chat. I just linked you and tagged you, so you can read it and maybe get a better idea of what I'm saying. Um, if I understood you correctly, you basically said that um, community is not that important at this stage, and treasury fund is. I don't
No, no,
think
no, no, no,
I
no,
don't
no,
think
no,
that's a fair
no,
assessment. Maybe I got it wrong, but
no, no,
as
no. I'm not saying the community is not important. No, no, no. All I'm saying, all I'm saying is,
it's
out
not
of
important.
the initiatives that we need to do, what do the community think is the highest priority to drive the Treasury Fund to optimize the ROI on that fund, right? Because everyone wants to optimize that fund, right, of cash. We don't want to waste it. There isn't a huge amount of surplus funds, and therefore, all I'm saying is if there is an initiative to, I don't know what that other initiative may be, but if there is a higher priority item on that list that needs the attention, then we need to allocate resource to that particular work stream. And maybe this will get a just smaller portion allocated, and then we can calculate what that reward should be to the OGs. I'm not saying they're not important. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying until we have a list of the work streams that we need to basically complete, then we can allocate what we've got in the tank to those priorities. Do we think that is enough to fund those work streams? And then we can work out what that requirement payment should look like. We're restricted by capital here at the moment, right? We've only got 256,000. So how do we allocate that?
I'm not sure we are thinking of the same numbers in terms of rewarding OGs. I was thinking of something that's more a sign of appreciation, not something that they can buy a new car with.
Right. Okay. But even to that point, right? Again, how is Ren being built? Steady, safe, secure, no rush, right? Even though we've got 256,000, every dollar should be accounted for and made sure that we collectively are allocating that to the best use case, right? Even if it is only $10, $20, whatever, the same approach should be adopted and thought about and considered. That's the way I see it. Is like the founders of this have gone about building Ren from a development perspective the right way, and that's where it's got and that's why they've delivered such an amazing product. But now the financial side needs to be delivered in the same fashion: slow, steady, get ROI on the cash, right?
No arguments about that. Everything that has to be documented, and everything has to be voted by dark nodes. No doubt about that. Definitely. But to better explain my line of thinking was that before Treasury was announced, before it got money in it, basically nobody was, okay, not nobody, a vast majority of community was idle, right? So we had like 10 to 15 people that were actually uh, basically doing all the community stuff that they can do. Yeah, and there were no rewards promised to them, nothing at all. They were just doing out of passion for Ren. And I think that's an extremely valuable thing to have in every community. And as of now, in my personal opinion, we are lacking on this front and lacking heavily. And to better engage and send a clear message that everyone doing anything for Ren are appreciated and will be rewarded in one way or another, either monetary or with a, I don't know, maybe a medium post saying thank you, Mr. I don't know, JH, Mr. Sorry, what's your name? I'm gonna wait a second. GLH DeFi, yeah. Say thank you, GLH DeFi, for joining us today and speaking out. Great job. Stuff like that. Um, on a human level, we are lacking on a human level, on a communications level, on engagement levels, and this is what I personally want to improve. I would like to improve.
Hi, I just want to comment that I think both things that what JLH is mentioned and RV is also mentioned, they can be done. You just need to organize whatever the treasury is gonna divide the amounts, and I think that's what JLH is sort of mentioning, RV, is that um, well, the way I understanding it is like there's gonna be sort of buckets where there may be a bucket that is for incentives or that sort of activities, and then from there we can organize how we wanted to address that money that is going to be there. But then everything's going to be accounted, right? So if, let's say, the treasury is organized in a way that there's some money for development, some for marketing, some for I don't know, incentives for in pools, etc. And then another one could be your idea, but that's sort of like a like we can do without whatever we want, but we were allocated something from the treasury to do those activities. So we just need to sort of decide how is that money going to be used. I think if I capture it correctly, DHL, this is what you're mentioning.
Mm. Do you have any remaining thoughts on this? Check the governance chat.
I think I'm just on the line of thought, Max, where everything just gets documented in terms of where the allocation of treasury needs to be directed. Right, the total list is everyone pours in their comments. it's then ranked accordingly, maybe by darkness, and then it's allocated on a budget basis, and then it's executed on that basis, and then possibly pros and cons of each work stream that the community want to allocate the treasury fund to, and any potential risks or any ROI that we anticipate.
Yeah, I believe if DeFi Whiskey was here, he would he would say that would be one of the mandates of the Treasury Committee to actually work on such a list. And since that Treasury Committee doesn't exist yet, it might make sense that the community has a forum poll or something. Someone makes a suggested list, and people can vote on what they find is the most prioritized. Because we can be slow on this if we want to, but there's also an opportunity to get some stuff done before everything is set up.
The other thing is also, Max, right, on this, right, is to get some sort of visibility on actual. I know, and this is a very difficult task in itself, is forecasting, right, what the treasury will look like in 12 months' time on a prudent basis, right? So then you can start to forward plan rather than retrospectively look at it.
So that. Sure. Can you maybe explain what is the point of that, especially what is the point of that in crypto space context? Do you know how the market will grow in 1 year's time? Because we are extremely reliant on that.
No, agreed. But what I'm saying is budgeting on a prudent basis, so that you can allocate resource to various work streams going forward with some degree of confidence that you can allocate that proportion of cash to that work stream going forward, rather than.
What I'm saying is that some very smart people from traditional finance are trying to basically import their methods of work and basically all they know, which is natural, obviously, into the crypto space. And I don't think that a lot of stuff applies. For example, DAOs and their structures. That's basically a completely new thing. Forecasting or modeling. I know DeFi Whiskey loves modeling, and it's a fun thing to do and interesting. But I mean, how reliable is that forecast? How reliable is that model? Are we going to check that? Are we going to backtest maybe? Is it a useful way to spend our resources at all? For example, instead of looking for a more lucrative APIs in different farms, for example, we are going to spend time forecasting something. What is the point of that? Just do the best job you can do, and the rest
I'm not sure
by the market.
Yeah, look, in terms of forecasting, we're only talking about 12-month forward-looking forecast. It doesn't take necessarily hours or days to do. It can take an hour to forecast with a degree of prudence, but it's just to get an understanding of what's going. I mean, do you have any insight going forward of how quickly that treasury fund looks like in 3 months' time? I don't. Do you? So how can we allocate resource to work streams that need to be done? So you need to get a base level in, right? And I know the world is changing very rapidly, but unfortunately, every business, doesn't matter how big or small, runs on cash flow forecasting, right? You can't go in blind, even if the budget is wrong, right? You can do a variance analysis to where your budget is completely wrong to what your actual is. At least that gives you some accountability, right? Yep. So you can't go into measuring funds and capital without having a plan, right?
100%. Yep.
And so we have to lay out a very clear 12-month plan. I'm not saying forecast and I agree, crypto changes rapidly, and BTC could be 100,000 quid and our treasury fund could grow, exponentially. But at least if we know that we're getting $6,000 per month on a base level, right, we can then allocate rewarding OGs 20 I don't know, 1,000 quid across the community, right? But until we have that visibility, we can't make any judgment calls. And that's ill advised. And I will say that, having my 20 years of finance experience, I'm very much pro the traditional finance way. I agree there is a blend of crypto coming in and it's a different way of working. However, the old guard are still there and they're still running businesses and they're still, developing and growing. So I don't see, you can't just bin what has been traditionally done and ignore that. You've got to embrace some of the old practices because there are still businesses working on those principles and they won't change.
Well, I can't argue about that, but I have a couple of questions. How valuable do you say forecasts are if they don't include the probability rate of something that they are forecasting?
Look, this is quite a unique situation because you've got the volatility in BTC, right, and you've got the volatility in trading volume, right. That it's quite difficult to predict because you don't know.
Integrations as well, and their volume as well.
But then you just have to take a base layer, right? You have to go, okay.
Definitely. So I can predict that the base layer of our community fund will be 50K per month, just like it has been for the last multiple months.
Okay, well then allocate the 50 grand per month, right? But then you can at least if it's 50 grand, then you can then allocate across these work streams of 20, right? We want to the weight of capital that we want to allocate to OG rewards, then we can do that and we can calculate it and then we can say what we've got left in the tank to do other things. But until you've done that plan, how you can't run before you can walk, right? You've got to do a little bit of groundwork to understand and document it so you get visibility. So if you say you don't do a budget because it's unpredictable, then how do you allocate capital?
I'm not saying it's unpredictable.
Yeah.
I'm saying that we are just spent like maybe 15 minutes discussing that stuff should be documented, which is pretty obvious in my opinion. And our base increase in community fund is also known. It's 50K, and it has been for quite a while. So why are we not discussing things that will help us move forward? And instead, we'll keep going around the things that are, as I said, pretty obvious. 50K base increase in community fund per month, and stuff should be documented and voted by dark nodes. It's set. It's already set. It's known.
I just need to jump in. I have to jump off now. Um, so I'll end my recording, but I want to thank everyone who participated, and you can stay in the call as well. I won't close it. But
I'll just say a last thing, maybe to the people. If you have any ideas how the budget can be allocated to the rewards, to the community rewards, I would very much be interested in reading your thoughts on this.
Yep. Great. Thank you, everyone. If you're dropping off now, yes. Thank you, RV and JLH and Mag and everyone who attended. See you guys next time. I'll upload this to YouTube.
Thank you. Bye.
Yes.